Hello, BookTube. As I feared, our chit-chat is going to be curtailed just a bit while I deal with a ninja deadline. A sudden, rather large, even by my standards, deadline that cropped up not in my own docket. I keep an eye on my docket. That's the whole point of having staggered, staged deadline work, is that you keep an eye on it. If you don't keep an eye on it, I'm not saying go nuts. You don't have to do multiple cross-index spreadsheets like I'm sure a certain Olive might be tempted to do, but you have to be on top of it. You have to know what's coming, even if it means just a regular old wall calendar that you jot things on. No, it's not me. Instead, it's a friend of mine who doesn't watch this channel. Like so many bookish people that I know in my life, not only doesn't watch this channel or any of your channels or any other channels on BookTube, but doesn't care to either. The greatest, most vibrant, most interesting and fun and challenging and non-homogeneous reading group that I have ever encountered in my life. And these bookish people, these allegedly bookish people, they'll go all the way through the first and second course of a meal that I'm paying for, saying how it's so hard to find good bookish conversation. They know perfectly well where I spend my time, that I loiter under the dim street lamps with the rest of you. Do they ever look at BookTube? No, they don't. But this old friend never looks at BookTube. He's one of the many that doesn't look at BookTube. So I can feel free to kvetch just a little about he had a large deadline. It's a big thing. It requires generating a lot of prose, and it somehow snuck up on him. I guess these things happened, but I'm perfectly happy to step in and help. I encourage friends who are up against it. It's very rare that it happens, but friends that are up against it in rare circumstances like that, I encourage them to let me know if there's anything I can do to help. I'd be happy to do it. The one bit of kvetching would be that if I am single-handedly hauling your hiney out of the frying pan, literally on the day of your deadline, might be nice if you weren't, kibitzing over my shoulder. That might be nice. If you're getting huge blocks of prose just handed to your inbox, literally saved, from having to go to an extremely generous paying editor and saying, I'm sorry, I don't have it. I know you needed it, but I don't have it. I might be able to have it at some future date, but I don't have it on the date we agreed to 6 months ago. If one person and one person alone is standing between you and that, and is doing it with a smile on his face, cheerfully and free, maybe you don't quibble about word choice and whatnot. But he's never going to see that, so I'm kvetching to you, that's all. But the practical effect for our little corner of BookTube, for this little imaginary conversation, is that it's cutting down on my time. I have little windows that open up throughout the day that I can take advantage of. I can just sort of swing the camera on and record something as a kind of palate cleanser. And because I feel genuinely cranky in the course of a day if I don't talk to you a few times. I feel genuinely not cranky, but something's definitely out of whack when that fails to happen. It's a problem for planned things. It's a problem for extravagance. I might swing the camera around and make a conversation like this, just to get my mind off things and refresh myself. But I can't do it 6 times in one day. No, I can't do that. And it doesn't help any that I had errands to run first thing this morning that were a little bit time-consuming. I mean, I did them with as much dispatch as possible. But the whole time, unlike usually the whole time when I do those sorts of things, all I'm thinking about is Frida. All I'm thinking about is how much I miss my baby. But this morning, I was thinking about that. I was also thinking, well, you really should be writing. You're going to need this time. But there was no way around it, so I did those errands, and those errands deposited me at the Brattle Bookshop right as it was opening. A great used bookstore right in the heart of downtown Boston. There was no way that I was going to deny myself a visit, even though I was just there the other day. The thing that I always say about the Brattle, it's absolutely true. If you go there, you'll see what I mean, is that the stock changes so much, and there's so much stock, that you really could go almost every day and not be bored and not feel like it was redundant. And that, I should point out, that's not just a function of the stock changing. It's also the other thing I mentioned. It's that you change. If you look, no matter how bookish a person you are, if you have only an hour and your eyes are scanning over thousands of books, you're going to miss things. You're not going to put two and two together. You're not going to pull the right book out that maybe triggers your instinct just a little, but you can't tell from the spine. You're not going to do that. You're going to do that differently on 2 consecutive days or 10 consecutive days. So I went back to the Brattle, and even though I was there just the other day, I got another pile of books, and I want to show them to you. It was also right around the time that I was heading there, was right around the first dog walking interval of the day on work days, on weekdays. Any of you who live in a city will know this. On weekdays, maybe not as much during the pandemic, but in Boston, people seem to be going out and about now. So in that relatively normal situation, a couple who they both have 10-hour a day jobs that they hate, they will say goodbye to the little dog that they absolutely should not have got. They absolutely should not have done that if they have no time for the animal whatsoever. None at all. Some time is necessary. You don't need a whole lot. I always tell people I know who say, well, I would love to get a dog, but I work all day long, and it's, I'm in the office 3 days a week out of 5. That just doesn't seem fair. I want a really big yard with moose traveling down the back 40. Then I'll get a dog. It's the equivalent of saying, well, I'd love to have a child, but I don't have a mansion for the child to live in. No human has ever said that, but they say that kind of nonsense about dogs all the time. I always tell people the best thing you could possibly do for yourself and for the dog, if you have a limited amount of time, if you're working 3 days a week, if you're gone for hours at a time during the day, the best thing you could possibly do is go to your local animal shelter and adopt the oldest dog, or the 2 oldest dogs. They will be incredibly grateful that you saved their lives. They will mostly want to sleep and hang around all day, and they will give you everything when you're around them. You'll want to make time for them. I always say that to people, and that is true. But if you're a young professional and you really only want a dog as a dry run to having a child that you're going to ignore, and you get a dog knowing that you are literally never going to see the animal, then you shouldn't. Then you shouldn't do that. Then you are prescribing an animal solitary confinement for most of its life. And just when you start to slice off enough time for it not to be solitary confinement, the reason you're slicing off that time is to take care of a baby. So again, the dog is ignored. In cities, one reflection of that pattern would be that dog walkers, professional dog walkers, would make the rounds first thing in the morning. Then they do it. A lot of them tend to be at noon to 1 thereabouts, and then, oh my God, from 5 to 6, the crush of dog walking hour. The owners still aren't around. They've been gone in meetings and PowerPoint presentations the whole time. But the dog walkers have those intervals that they go on, and just as I was heading up to the Brattle, there were a whole bunch of dog walkers out and about with crowds of their dogs. Because you wouldn't think it when you look at downtown Boston. It looks fairly antiseptic, but all those buildings, you've got the cookie cutter overpriced cafes and venues and whatnot on the street level, but there's 100 stories of residential living above that, going up into the sky, everywhere. So there's lots and lots of people. And I ran across a young woman walking 2 dogs. They were about Frida's size, but they were older. They were fuzzier. They seemed more like Deb dogs than Frida. They were small, stubby legs, cantankers, and I was feeling a little bit on the odd side, a little bit rotten. I hadn't been to the Brattle yet. I was wanting something to pick my spirits up, and I said to them as I was approaching them, I said, "Oh, babies, hello," and the 2 of them were looking at me like that. And the young one was very nice. She said, they're not my dogs. I never know how they're going to react to other people, but they don't tend to like other people. I'm sorry. We're just gonna have to go on. I was, as usual, ignoring her. I tend to ignore humans that say that sort of thing, especially since by this point the little dogs and I had been looking at each other for 15 or 20 seconds, which is absolutely all that's necessary. After 20 seconds, the dog is never, under any circumstances whatsoever, going to bite me. They might, if I ask, bite her, but they're not going to bite me. Instead, I said what I always do. I give a big smile and I say, how about we let them decide? And I didn't wait for an answer. Instead, I squat down. The two little things came all over me, all with their tiny little flicky tongues all over me. It was delightful. It put a smile on my face before I could get to the Brattle. And then I got to the Brattle, and it was just, I didn't bother shopping inside because the sale lot is thousands and thousands of books, and they're all cheap. $1, $3, or $5. So I just shopped for a while. I had 2 errands to run after that, but I shopped for a while there, and I got a pile of books. It's the last pile of books for a while, but still. The first batch that I want to show you, the first 3, actually the first 5 are all mass market paperbacks. And all of these mass market paperbacks are things that I've had and read that I just got again because they were $1. Because they were $1, and because one of you was kind enough to phone in a gift certificate to the Brattle. That is just so incredibly nice. There was credit, there was store credit waiting for me. I often say on this channel, I'll say it now, just in case the mood strikes you, that the Brattle is always up for taking store credit over the phone. They're always up for doing that. Just call and say, depending on who you get on the phone, you could just say, I want to give Steve store credit. You don't even have to use my last name. They'll almost certainly know who you're talking about. It happens a lot. I'm very happy, very grateful to say it happens a lot. And one of you had recently done that, so I didn't pay anything for these books, and that means they're extra interesting to me. The first 3 that I want to show you are classics. And I got them because they are these old Bantam white-spined mass market paperbacks. I have a tiny little collection of them. I really like them. I just really like the design that was happening for this run. The first one is Kidnapped by Robert Louis Stevenson. This is what they look like. And I've got a bunch of them, and I just love it. I just love them. This is a Wyeth illustration there. I saw a Wyeth illustrated book today at the Brattle that I agonized about. I eventually didn't get it. There was, for a long time ago, Mark Richardson would probably know, it was about 100 years ago, or maybe a little less than that, there was a big, long, multi-book series commissioned for people to write histories of the rivers of the United States. Huge series. I think there were probably 3 or 4 dozen titles in that series. Mark and Jason would probably know the details of it, but one of the volumes in that series was the Brandywine River, which, if you know your revolutionary history, the American Revolution, if you know your American settler history, if you know your American history just in general, you know the Brandywine is a historic river. It really, a lot of things happened in connection with the Brandywine River, not just one particular battle. And it was written by Henry Kydell Canby, who I really like, and it was illustrated by Andrew Wyeth. The illustrations were black and white. It looked like sketches. There were no full color plates that I could see. Even the cover looked to me to be a colorized pencil sketch. And I held it in my hand, actually thinking, this is tempting. I love the way this author writes. I love this artist. I love the history of the Brandywine River. Then I thought, no, you don't. You like about 10 minutes in the history of the Brandywine River. All the rest of this is going to be flour mills, flatboats, a little gambling. This is a classic example of the kind of book that looks good as an impulse buy at the Brattle, but then I don't ever look at it. A couple of members of the Brattle staff who've known me the whole of their adult lives will sometimes see me holding something like that. Usually it's inside the shop. They'll see me examining such a book and they'll just gently take it away from me. They didn't have to do it this time. I put that back this time. Somebody's going to want that more than I do. And imagine if, I didn't check to see, but imagine if that volume that I saw on the Brandywine River today was part of an entire set that somebody sold to the Brattle. And imagine if I just got the one on a random whim when somebody might have come in a week later and wanted the whole set. Riverine history, there's probably people out there who want that set. I left it. But I was still happy to get this, even though I have a million copies of Kidnap. The next one is the Bantam classic of Gulliver's Travels and Other Writings by Jonathan Swift. These were very, very popular in schools. And I love Jonathan Swift. I just love him. I especially love Gulliver's Travels, but there's a lot of other great stuff in here as well. But Gulliver's Travels is one of those books that I can just endlessly reread. And I didn't have the Bantam mass market in this edition, so I grabbed it. And the last one has seen better days, but I'll clean it up. And that is Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, with this great cover, just a tiny little thing like that. So I got 3 canonical classics in these old Bantam mass market paperbacks. Happy to do it. Then another mass market paperback that I got is a Viking Portable edition. I've shown you this many, many times over the years. I always get rid of it. I get it. I show it. Somebody says, oh, I really want that, and I'll never find it on my own. And I say, you're right. You never will. So I send it. I don't have it now, so now I have a copy. It's in perfect condition, so I'm hoping that I get to keep it. And it's the Viking Portable Conservative Reader, edited by the great Russell Kirk, who we've seen on this channel in a number of different books. I've shown you a couple of books about him and a couple of books by him, including his much maligned study of Edmund Burke. And that's exactly what this is. He has an introduction here, and then he picks the best conservative writing from the last 200 years. Who have we got in here? Alexander Hamilton, John Adams, John C. Calhoun, Fenimore Cooper. There's fiction by Joseph Conrad and Rudyard Kipling. And there are conservative critics: Irving Babbitt, George Santayana, Paul Elmer Moore, and selections from the writings of Benjamin Disraeli, Alexis de Tocqueville, Nathaniel Hawthorne, Henry Adams, Robert Louis Stevenson, T.S. Eliot, Phyllis McGinley, and Malcolm Muggeridge, and also Irving Kristol. And it's the Viking. You already know I love the Viking Portable series. I just think they're so, so great. I honestly don't know why Viking Penguin doesn't continue to print them. Not the crappy trade paperback versions that they made of a few of these titles that were very poorly done. 1 dot of glue under the spine for those trade paperbacks, and ugly covers. So that if you could hold your nose and ignore the cover, the book was still going to pop apart on you while you were reading it, much less rereading it. I don't know why Viking Penguin doesn't just continue to print these mass market paperbacks. Exactly like this. The big block of the title, the Penguin logo, and a gorgeous, stately cover with a little inset of some key figure. Usually the author, in this case, one of the that's not Russell Kirk. In this case, one of the writers in the anthology. I don't know why they don't just keep doing this, but I love them, and I love this volume. I read it especially wistfully, not only in an ongoing and doomed attempt to understand David Murphy, but also as part of the wistful struggle that David Murphy sometimes alludes to, which is, if you are a student of historical conservatism as a philosophy or even a personal philosophy, what are you supposed to do in the 21st century? What are you supposed to do when anything that calls itself conservative in the 21st century has degenerated into a literal death cult? It's a cult because it has one, for want of a better word, charismatic leader who none of the adherents below consider to be completely human. They consider him, genuinely, without irony, to consider him to be a little more than human. And that's the cult part. And the death part is that dear leader, that shining cult figure, has, for the better part of 2 years, demonized a vaccine against a virus. Because, if the virus is all that tough, then I must not be. Classic authoritarian mind frame. You see it everywhere in COVID responses in strongman authoritarian-led countries, where they view it as a slight on themselves, and so they don't prioritize it. I have no idea what you're supposed to do if at the Conservative Political Action Committee, that's what it's called, that's what CPAC is called, if at CPAC a speaker on the stage can mention that a huge percentage of American adults are still not vaccinated against this deadly virus, and that fact can get a round of applause, then if you are of a conservative mind frame or an actual conservative, what are you supposed to do in the 21st century? I have no idea whatsoever. I can tell you one thing, beyond a shadow of a doubt. Every single person in this book would have been repulsed by what they see in the 21st century, especially in the death cult of Donald Trump. So what you do in that circumstance, it isn't a question that I myself personally have to ask, but my heart goes out to the conservative-minded people that I know. What does George Will do? He lived long enough to see this era. And when he gets hauled onto cable news shows to talk about some, especially during Trump's presidency, when he would get hauled on to talk about the latest, no exaggeration here, the latest federal crime that the President of the United States had committed in public. When some news show would haul George Will on to talk about it, he always looked like he'd just been hit in the head with a 2x4. He's accustomed to talking about conservative and liberal. He's accustomed to talking about a political spectrum where people can make boneheaded decisions, they can make wise decisions, you can have honorable enemies. He's accustomed to all of that. And they haul him on to talk about a millenarian, apocalyptic, dystopian monster who wants people to die so that his numbers don't look bad. What is George Will supposed to do with that? What is he supposed to do with 100 million people in the United States saying that Donald Trump is the country's foremost conservative? If you're George Will, what do you do? Open your veins in a bathtub? You just close your eyes and hope for better days? Maybe I would be willing to bet that the thing that George... I asked it as a rhetorical question, but I'd be willing to bet the thing that George Will has done, that he did during the Trump administration, was to uncork a thimble of bourbon, in his case, really expensive bourbon, and pull down this book and just read until the whole world was comfortable and numb. And then the last mass market paperback is something we've seen already. I found a hardcover at the Brattle just recently, but I found a Penguin mass market, so I grabbed it. This is edited by John Ball, the creator of Virgil Tibbs. They call me Mr. Tibbs. And this is the mystery story in a mass market paperback that, again, has a crease. It's seen better days, but I couldn't leave it behind because I have the hardcover. And Jason Harrigan, late lamented BookTube fame, a lot of you have mentioned, where is Jason? I will direct you to a video. He put a video up on his channel, just decided that he gave BookTube a try, made a lot of great friends, had a lot of fun. There's no rancor, there's no disillusionment at all. He just continuing to make videos is not for him, that's all. But he is a book collector, as well as a book aficionado, and he reintroduced me to the term reading copy, which I think in book collecting circles and out of book collecting circles is just the mother of all rationalizations for buying doubles intentionally. I think that's what it is. Certainly that's how I used it today, because I have a copy of this book already, but I don't have the Penguin Green Spine mass market paperback. And this is a whole bunch of mystery writers talking about a whole bunch of different aspects of mystery writing. We are right now in the middle of Subgenre September, a satellite event of March Mystery Madness, so that we don't have to wait all the way to March to talk about mystery novels. The actual week of Subgenre September is coming up. I think it starts on the 18th or something like that. But this book is right up that alley. It's all about subgenres. Gothic mysteries, paranormal mysteries, police procedural mysteries, the amateur sleuth, the PI, the hard-boiled PI, all that sort of stuff. Hauling in all sorts of people here. So now I have a reading copy as well as my main copy. Those are all the mass market paperbacks. Then we have some paperbacks and some hardcovers. And the first paperback is also Penguin. This is Rose Macaulay, who's one of my favorite 20th century writers. And this is They Went to Portugal. And this is her meditation. This is not an anthology of writing. It's much more valuable than that. If it were just an anthology of... She demarcates English people going to Portugal for whatever reason, vacation, business, whatever, starting with the Crusades, when it was neither vacation nor business, and going all the way to the present day. British diplomats, British merchantmen, British vacationers. She takes all of that, but instead of giving you excerpts from their writings, as everybody wrote about those things, like you would find in a travel anthology, she sort of writes about those periods. So it's a feast of Rose Macaulay prose, in addition to being all sorts of historical details about this pilgrimage to Portugal. I read this as a library copy, I don't even know, a long, long time ago, and loved it. Absolutely loved it. In her introduction, she says, she lays out sort of what she picked and why. She lays out the historical guidelines. She's going to start really with the Crusades and move on to the present day, but not quite the present day. She's very clear in her introduction that she's not dealing with the living, because that introduces problems of its own. And I think, if memory serves, she wrote a sequel to this that was designed not to be published until after she was dead. that I think was called They Went to Portugal 2. Not the number 2, but TOO. I'm not 100% sure of that. It calls to me because it's a Rose Macaulay book I have not read. And I might be wrong. I might be imagining. She might have only thought to do that and not done it. But she did this. I have longed to have my own copy and reread it. I'll reinforce it because it's not a particularly good, in good shape as a trade paperback. But I have almost no Rose Macaulay here, and our nonfiction, of course, predictably, is something that's going to appeal to me a lot more, even than her fiction. Her fiction is really good, but I have been to Portugal many times. I've never actually been tempted to stay there. Sometimes I would end up going to a place many, many times, either by accident or on purpose, and then I would think, maybe I should stay here for a while. And I was never tempted to do that with Lisbon. I was never tempted to do that with Portugal, in the way that, for instance, I was tempted to do it with Prague. But I still loved it, and this is going to be great. I'm going to know a lot of the minor historical characters that are in here, and I'm pretty sure there are some major historical characters in here as well, like Byron. We shall see. Then this next one, beautiful thing, just a beautiful hardcover in one of these plastic library dust jacket covers. So I grabbed it. You saw the other day when I went to the Brattle, I got Van Wyk Brooks' book, The World of Washington Irving, even though it was a double, because it was in much better shape than the copy that I have. And predictably, when you see a thing like that at the Brattle, you are almost certainly going to see other things like that as well. Typically, a person who sells that to the Brattle won't just sell that to the Brattle. Same thing is true with, for instance, Will and Ariel Durant. Their History of Civilization, in 12 volumes, those big fat books that you may have read when you were younger. Typically speaking, you will never see just one of those volumes in the Brattle sale lot. If you see just one volume, you know you're going to see all the others in very short order. They're going to stick together. And the same thing is true here. I found another Van Wyk Brooks. This is in the times of Melville and Whitman. Look at how lovely that cover is. It is just lovely. And you don't get a chance really to appreciate how lovely that cover is when you usually see this book, because the cover is in tatters and really dirty. Here, it's like new. Just wonderful. Just what I love. By the time he wrote this and other books like this, Van Wyk Brooks was the stereotypical crusty old man of letters. Talked like he'd just come down from Mount Ararat with a conversation with God. Lived in ostentatious Cato-like simplicity in small-town Connecticut, and was fond of pronouncements. The problem with grand old men of letters is that they stop thinking about things and start pronouncing. It's always sad to watch that happen. It happens in almost every case. Even Harold Bloom, who I would say is one of the most childlike, enthusiastic readers. Someone who maintained a childlike enthusiasm for reading almost right up until the very end. Even he was fond of pronouncing. Gore Vidal went from putting an opinion on the table and saying, all right, let's talk about this, to simply pronouncing. And Van Wyk Brooks had a mile-wide tendency to do that anyway, but he's also a fascinating writer. So I don't really care. If he pronounces about Melville and Whitman in this book, and he does quite a bit. There's quite a bit also that will be really fascinating. Reading him about Melville is always fascinating, and I haven't read this book from front to back in a long, long time. And now I have this perfect thing. It'll go right alongside the other one. I'm just wondering. I have in the little brick room his great book, The Flowering of New England. This author has probably 8 books. If you don't read anything else by this author, read The Flowering of New England. And it's the thing that catapulted him to fame. The Flowering of New England and New England Indian Summer. And I have The Flowering of New England in a very pretty little hardcover in the little book room. It's not part of this. It doesn't look like this. It doesn't look like The World of Washington Irving. So naturally, I'm wondering, along the lines of the Rose Macaulay, I'm wondering if The Flowering of New England and New England Indian Summer are going to show up in beautiful hardcovers like this at the Brattle real soon. That'd be great. I'll be right there to catch them in my net. I'm the only person out in that sale lot who will even care about such things. So if it turns up, I'm happy to have it. But that one I have. And that's the one I reread the most. Although going back to his discussion of Melville will be terrific. Then this next one is going to go on the floor-to-ceiling books about books and books of reviews and collections of literary essays. That huge bookcase that I remade successfully in Operation Harrigan. I remade it specifically so that it could be expanded a great deal because I keep finding these books. This is like the 6th one in 1 week. I am nowhere near reaching the limit of that new improved bookcase, so I grabbed this without a second thought. And it is Edmund White, the great gay novelist Edmund White. This is a collection of his occasional writing, Arts and Letters, about a whole bunch of literary figures. See? You've got Bruce Chatwin there. You've got Alan Garganis, of course. You've got Grace Paley, Michel Foucault, James Merrill, Oscar Wilde, Joe Orton, Paul Bowles. Fantastic. I will have seen some of these, but not all of them. And of course, the first thing I'm going to do is read the little piece on Proust. I just recently got his Penguin Lives 100-page biography of Proust. Who knows what this thing will be? I actually don't know. I haven't really taken a look at this thing yet, so I don't know what these are exactly. Are they prefaces, or are they actual book reviews of somebody's new biography of Paul Bowles or whatever? I haven't looked. It'll be fine to me either way. I will go through this. I'll read a few of the things that are of pressing interest right now, and then it will go on that bookcase for future consultation. I consult these things. These are they're vastly more talented than I am, but they are still my peers. They are doing the stuff that I do. So that's great. I confess my absolute sweet tooth for this kind of writing is collections of book reviews. In the trenches book reviews. And by in the trenches, I mean you're working with a new book. It's for tomorrow's paper. It's not a 4,000-word essay in the New York Review of Books that you expect to last forever. Instead, it's, so-and-so's latest book, and I am just commissioned for $50 to write about it. So I'm going to do that. I myself love sifting through those things. I don't believe it's possible for a talented writer to leave their talent behind, no matter how small the assignment is, no matter how quick the assignment is, no matter how they're bashing away on a manual typewriter. I don't believe it's possible for them to do, and I love reading it. So if these are bespoke prefaces, as I suspect they are, they'll have a little bit less interest to me, but they'll still be fascinating to me, absolutely. And then the last thing that we have here is from the University of California Press from years ago. It's part of a series that they did of standalone, big, authoritative biographies of English monarchs. I used to have a whole shelf of these things, and then I had a fire. there was a fire in a place where I used to live, and when the fire trucks came, they blasted their hose through the living room window in a neat little parabola, and the water came down straight on my wall-length biography section, devastating it. The rest of the books in that room, some of them were damp, some of them were singed, but that biography wall was completely destroyed, turned to oatmeal. So I've been gradually rebuying these things. They can be a bit on the dry side. This one is a bit on the dry side, but they're usually the best full-length treatments of the person. And this is King Edward IV. Charles Ross's biography of King Edward IV. They all look like this. A lot of times you'll see them without without the dust jacket. They have this square on the side there. A lot of times the naked hardcover is maroon. But this is the older brother. You can't tell it from this portrait. Don't let this portrait fool you. He was a god on earth. He was tall and beautiful and smart and funny and insightful. He was Richard III's older brother. And he was murdered by Richard III. Your history books won't tell you that, but Steve is telling you that, and who do you believe more? Do your history books have that face right there? No, he was murdered by his younger brother, Richard, Duke of Gloucester. And when Richard murdered him in order to get closer to the throne, Edward was the second king that Richard had killed, and the second brother that Richard had killed. Kind of amazing. And Richard wasn't done, of course, because once Edward was killed, Richard realized that he had two other kings in his way before he became king himself. So he killed Edward's oldest son. The minute Edward's oldest son died, Edward's youngest son became king, and then a second later was killed himself. I don't really care if it was a cat's paw who did that, a cat or a rat or whatever kind of paw. I don't really care who it was. It was done because Richard wanted it to happen. It wouldn't have been done otherwise. Which means that Richard III, the character that then ascended to the throne as Richard III, had killed a grand total of 4 kings, 2 brothers, and 2 nephews. That's pretty unequaled anywhere in human history that we know of for a famous person. That puts Richard III on Old Testament levels of intimate bloodkin bloodshed. But Richard is only a small part of this book. This is a large part of Edward, of his life. He led a very tempestuous life on and off the throne. Wasn't particularly a good English king for anybody else to know. He whelped on a lot of loans, for instance, that set England standing back a long way. But he's fascinating to read about. And I don't have any other biography of him. There won't be that many biographies of him, unlike his brother, where there are 80 million. I'm pretty sure I don't have any other biography of him, so I will reread bits and pieces of this, and then on the royalty shelf it goes. Right in the midst of my Edwards. There's Edward II, notorious memory. Then there's Edward III, the great Edward III, and then there's Edward IV. So I snatched this, of course, because all of these were free. So thanks to a generous credit, these were all free. Always accepting Brattle credits. Just call the shop. Anyway, so that was the Brattle today. Not going to be another Brattle visit for a while, so store this up. We have Ross's biography of Edward IV. Really the definitive book. It could have been a little bit more entertaining, but you can't ask for the moon when you're getting somebody willing to dig through the archives for the way this author does. Then Arts and Letters by Edmund White, a collection of bookish prefaces and whatnot. We have In the Times of Melville and Whitman by Wyk Brooks, now forgotten, but once very prominent U.S. man of letters. They Went to Portugal by the great Rose Macaulay, all about trips to Portugal over the years. And then some mass markets, a reading copy of The Mystery Story, edited by John Ball, the Viking Portable Conservative Reader, edited by Russell Kirk, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde in one of these bantam white spine mass market classics, Gulliver's Travels and Other Writings, also in the same format, and finally Kidnapped by Robert Louis Stevenson. So a fine Brattle haul full of stuff that I'm just going to inventory and then put away, but also full of stuff that I'm going to dig into to the limited extent that I can do that. I won't be digging into any of these things tonight. Tonight is crunch time. Tonight, I mean, I can make videos like this on and off during the day, but tonight it absolutely needs to be done. In fact, it really should be done by close of business today. That really should be the case. And I need to find out also from my old friend what the lay of the land is here. What would be endangered or what wouldn't be endangered if he were to gently float the possibility of Monday. Generally speaking, I find that Friday deadlines are really Monday morning deadlines. And that can sometimes make a huge difference for a dilatory writer, as we're dealing with in this case. That could make a huge difference. So we'll float an inquiry there if it's possible. You got to be very careful about this sort of thing. You don't want to miss a deadline. But if you can gently suggest to an editor that a couple of extra days on the deadline would be a great help, a lot of times they'll be perfectly happy to do it. Most editors aren't going to be at their desks on the weekend. So most of them aren't going to do anything with this thing until Monday morning anyway. And in this case, that would be a lot more time. So we will float that idea, but I'm operating on the assumption that we should finish by end of business today. So I'm not going to be able to dig into these things the way I want to until all of that is done. But anyway, that's your Brattle trip for today. I don't know when the next one will be. Next week? I don't know. I don't know. What we shall see. You'll be the first to know. Thank you, BookTube.